He didn't recognize her. Well, it's surprising. Where have we ever seen someone attack and rape their own wife? Serial maniac. When people hear these words, they hope that trouble will pass them by, and they'll miraculously avoid falling into the hands of a monster. However, when it comes to a small town with a population of 50,000 people, anyone could become a victim, even the serial killer's own wife, whom he didn't recognize. The maniac we're going to talk about today was a modest firefighter from the town of Abinsk in the Krasnodar region. He built his own house, where he lived with his wife and 2 children. He loved hunting. According to his wife's recollections, he could dash off into the forest in the dead of night, supposedly to check his snares. But he rarely brought back any game. As it later turned out, his victims were young women, elderly ladies, and schoolgirls. The man stalked them outside the city, forcing some into sexual acts and brutally killing others. He committed his crimes wearing a mask, a black balaclava from a firefighter's helmet. That's why he was nicknamed Fantomas. He ambushed women in the forest or deserted alleys. If he encountered active resistance, he killed the victim. If a woman was with a man, he demanded that the man hand over his companion. If the man tried to protect her, he killed the protector with his hunting rifle. Before we begin, let me quickly remind you to subscribe to the channel and like the video, not for the horrific stories, but for my work on this video for you. Also, don't forget to leave comments. They really help promote the video. In the early 1970s, the provincial town of Abinsk was a little-known, quiet district center with a population of 50,000. The town's measured life was rarely disrupted by anything serious beyond petty thefts or domestic quarrels. The summer of 1973. Beautiful weather for walks. Genya and Sveta decided to hide from prying eyes in the thick of the forest. But they weren't alone there. A figure in a mask was stalking the young couple. The unknown man approached and said, "Leave the girl to me." The girl in the white dress, like a bride, froze in horror. The guy started begging, "Don't touch us. She's my fiancée." Genya stood in front of the girl, and a moment later, a shot rang out. The guy fell. Fantomas killed him and then, right next to her beloved's body, forced the girl into a sexual act. But the maniac spared Sveta's life. Yevgeny had just returned from the army a few weeks before this horror and was planning to propose to his beloved. His life was just beginning, but it ended so terribly. This marked the start of a series of brutal murders and assaults that lasted a long 4 years. Investigators arrived at the crime scene only in the morning. Many footprints were found near the body. The criminal had clearly been watching the couple for several hours. But why? The first theory was a love triangle. Yevgeny had been in the army for 2 years. During that time, Sveta might have caught the eye of some guy, who in turn couldn't accept rejection. Detectives determined that the criminal's shoe size was 43. When they began questioning Sveta, she couldn't describe his face because of the mask, but she remembered some details. "He spoke to me gently, said that if I have a child, he'll marry me." After those words, the love triangle theory started to seem more plausible. Investigators continued probing the brutal crime, and at the murder scene, a scrap of paper was found. It was a torn piece from the magazine Around the World. This became a crucial lead. They started checking libraries and discovered that a certain Nikiforov had repeatedly returned issues with pages torn out. Operatives immediately went to his home and were about to arrest him when his mother intervened and said that she too had been attacked by the Fantomas they were looking for. That day, Yulia Nikiforova had gone to the water pump for water. It was dark, and no one was on the street. Suddenly, someone grabbed her by the throat and dragged her into the bushes. Yulia managed to break free and hit the attacker with a yoke. The criminal was wearing a mask. 2 local men came running at her scream and scared off the maniac. Detectives decided that there were already many victims. People just weren't reporting them. While the investigation into Genya's murder was ongoing, a new crime occurred. The whole region already knew about the horrific maniac, but the Kutov family thought nothing would happen to them. That turned out to be a big mistake. That day, a family from Belorechynsk arrived in Abinsk, the father, mother, and daughter, to pick wild pears and sorrel. Suddenly, they heard an order, "Give me the girl." He demanded they hand over the daughter. When the family turned around, they saw a man in a mask with a rifle. The mother begged to go in her daughter's place. He assaulted her in front of her husband and daughter, but he didn't back down from his initial demand. He demanded the daughter. Fortunately, nothing happened with her. The maniac didn't have enough of a break to gather his strength. The man didn't stand up to defend them. Fantomas didn't touch him. A couple of weeks later, another crime. That evening, Vladimir was waiting for his girlfriend Anya on a date. The couple was walking by the lake shore, and from behind the bushes, a man in a mask was watching them. After a while, Vladimir and Anya heard a question. "What are you doing here?" Before them stood a man with a rifle. Without hesitation, the maniac shot the guy. The monster assaulted Anya, and then went to take the contents of the guy's pockets. The new brutal crime stirred up the whole town again. The residents of Abinsk began to fear the maniac. Husbands met their wives after work, and parents forbade young girls from going out in the evenings. Police officers searched for the monster among the acquaintances of the victims, patrolled parks and forest strips. However, the searches led nowhere. It would later turn out that among those participating in the manhunt was the criminal himself. Fantomas acted boldly. He was literally elusive, which made him even more dangerous, and the police were powerless. Abinsk detectives worked day and night to catch the maniac, organizing raids, sending undercover female officers in miniskirts with transistor radios, followed by policemen. There were no results. Couldn't be said that the police were doing nothing. The maniac was just good at hiding. While, without exaggeration, hundreds of law enforcement officers tried to catch the criminal, he seemed to have gone off the rails. His victims became dozens more women and girls. Another incident happened a few months after the last murder. Fantomas stopped a car, killed the taxi driver, and assaulted the girl. The criminal took another life with his rifle. A theory emerged that he was a hunter. It was decided to try catching Fantomas with bait again. And once he bit. That night, Nina Kovalenko became the bait. The maniac attacked so swiftly that the children's room police officer forgot about her pistol and couldn't scream right away. He clamped her mouth shut, and when she did scream, help didn't come immediately. Other unsuccessful ambushes had dulled vigilance. Later, they chased the criminal, shooting, but he escaped. Fantomas had gone so mad that, not yet evading the pursuit, he saw a woman at a bus stop, assaulted her, and ran further, later disappearing. A detailed map of his crimes was compiled. Since they occurred at different times of day, the theory was pursued that Fantomas worked either as a beekeeper or a collector of medicinal herbs. The noose was tightening. But then one of the most unusual stories happened next. A few days later, the deranged monster went hunting again. That late evening, Galina left her work shift earlier than scheduled and headed home. The woman hurried, looking back at every rustle. And not without reason. Only a few hundred meters remained to her house when suddenly, from behind a tree, the maniac jumped out. He grabbed the woman by the throat. Her bag fell to the ground. Galina screamed loudly and called for her son to help, as the house was nearby. At that moment, the maniac released the victim and froze. He was shocked and the woman ran home. Fantomas stood and just watched the fleeing victim. The monster was crushed because it dawned on him that he had attacked his own wife. In the history of criminology, there had never been a case where a maniac didn't recognize his own spouse and attacked her. Besides this mistake, Fantomas also brought the bag and hat home that his wife had dropped during the attack. When Galina saw the bag at home that she had dropped, she was horrified. Then the thought flashed in her mind, "It seems my husband is the brutal maniac." The woman made the right choice and went to the police. A few hours later, 3 cars arrived at the house for a search. The man himself wasn't there. He was on duty at the fire station where he was later arrested. Investigators noted that the house was clean. Family photos hung in every corner. They also found a rifle, presumably the one used to kill 3 men. But he had a permit for it, and there seemed to be no serious leads. Suddenly, on the son's wrist, they saw a watch presumably belonging to one of the murdered men. Later, Fantomas's mask was found too. The owner of the apartment turned out to be Nikolai Trunov. All these years, victims assumed the maniac wore black women's stockings during attacks. But it turned out Nikolai committed his atrocities in a black firefighter's balaclava. The maniac was born in 1940 in the village of Trinovka in the Stavropol region. In 1962, he married Galina. The couple had 2 sons. In 1969, the family moved to the town of Abinsk. He worked not as a watchman or herb collector, but as a firefighter. In his free time, he did odd jobs, building huts. And, of course, he was a passionate hunter. He'd take his rifle and cartridges and head into the forest for 2 to 3 days. In ordinary life, he didn't stand out, he worked normally. And his family was normal. His wife, however, complained about her husband's heightened sexual activity. You come home exhausted from your shift, and he insists, yes, yes. The head of the family built the house himself and was generally a handyman. He loved the sauna and wandering the surrounding forests with his hunting rifle slung over his shoulder. If he quarreled with his wife at home, he'd immediately run off to nature. Nikolai was positive in every sense. At work in the fire depot, he received commendations, participated in the city's public life, and was an athlete. His 15-year-old son, also named Nikolai, loved his father. But he harbored an inexplicable hatred for Fantomas. He was obsessed with the idea of dealing with him, made a knuckle duster for that purpose, and shared plans with his father on how to catch the scoundrel. His sister and her daughter also lived with them. The uncle looked at his niece in a far from familial way and gave her instructions. Watch out, dear. If Fantomas attacks you, don't resist or he'll kill you. The niece shared her concerns with her aunt about her uncle constantly scaring her with Fantomas. The aunt didn't pay much attention to the conversation, but it apparently stuck in her subconscious. The Trunovs' family life fell apart in 1972. According to Nikolai's confession, his wife stopped satisfying him as a woman. Galina feared pregnancy and abortions, which happened regularly. Nikolai's wife had suspected something was wrong for a long time. Her husband often disappeared after work and sometimes didn't come home at night, citing being busy. I had an increased need for sexual relations. I performed sexual acts daily, but my wife didn't like it, the criminal complained to investigators. Nikolai started making forays to the outskirts of the city and ambushing women there. After killing 3 men, he sewed himself several masks. One from his son's sports tights, another from women's panties. He pulled them over his head to avoid being identified, which is why he got the nickname of the main character from the popular French film. He ambushed lonely women and threatened them with murder. In 1976, with a 1-month interval, he assaulted the same woman twice. I'm not a human, but a beast. Pleas are useless, Nikolai said about himself. Once, he even assaulted an acquaintance and was very afraid she'd identify him. One time I came home, husband wasn't there, and then I see him under the bed. He didn't explain his behavior at all, confessed the monster's wife. As per the court materials, Fantomas' wife didn't realize for a long time who she was living under the same roof with, but everything changed with the attack incident. Galina went to the police and reported her suspicions. On March 1, 1977, he was arrested and confessed to everything. With manic precision, he showed the places where he committed crimes and described the victims he attacked. During the investigation, when the group went to a crime scene, Nikolai asked to remove his handcuffs. The law enforcers obliged. After walking a bit into the forest, the maniac saw a girl, the same Nina he had attacked during the ambush. While everyone was distracted, the criminal suddenly ran. But unexpectedly, a minute later, he returned with flowers. In total, according to the investigation, he forced sexual acts on 30 women. He recognized many from stakeouts and took the lives of 3 men. However, not all victims could be established in court, so the criminal was officially charged with only 30 assaults and 3 murders. Many women didn't report to the police, fearing public condemnation and shame. That's why it's safe to assume there were at least twice as many victims. Nikolai's victims, during the investigation, said that after the assault, he always tried to have a heart-to-heart talk and calm them down. The maniac didn't torture or beat them. He treated them with understanding, according to their words. To one of the women, after the crime, he even kissed her hands, consoling and soothing her. His colleagues also characterized him as a responsive man, ready to help anyone in need. According to relatives, he was a good father. Psychiatric evaluation deemed him sane. The maniac was aware of what he was doing. The criminal trial was conducted quickly. In November 1978, he was sentenced to the highest measure of punishment, death penalty. The sentence was carried out 12 months later. I realize my guilt sitting in isolation, and I give my word that I will be useful to society and our state, as well as the party and the people. I will try to wash away the dirty stain. My sons will be proud of me. I will cover this dirt only with good. I'm still young. I don't need women. I will put all my strength into labor. I've never feared it. I will try to justify your trust. Nikolai wrote to the judge. After his death, his wife asked the court to lift the seizure on their house. She wanted to sell the property and move away with her sons from Abinsk. Soon, she managed to do so, and the traces of Fantomas' family were lost. Over 3 years, more than 30 women and 3 men became victims of the serial criminal. The maniac, whom the people nicknamed Fantomas, turned out to be an exemplary family man, firefighter, and public assistant to the police. Thus, Nikolai was detained and arrested only because he attacked his own wife. It's terrifying to imagine how many more victims there could have been.